Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us on this sacrificial Monday for a nation which has been forced to give up Carnival 2020 in light of the dangers of COVID-19, the invisible enemy. The new PPP administration in Guyana on a vulgar, divisive and vindictive campaign, says Granger. This story takes the lead in our 916th edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday 10th August 2020. Details after this important message.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. Former President of Guyana, David Granger, has warned the PPP about consequences for their actions for targeting former ministers and government officials. Here are some details from Travis Chase of HGP Nightly News.
Former ministers evicted from government quarters, the locking out of some public servants from the Ministry of the Presidency, and the firing of some contracted workers attached to the Ministry of the Presidency have all been described by former President David Granger as a dangerous pattern of aggression days after the PPP government took office. Former President David Granger, during a live broadcast on Friday, warned the PPP against such acts.
People's National Congress warns the People's Progressive Party to desist from pursuing this dangerous pattern of aggression against officials, members of society, and persons perceived to belong to other political parties. The PPP will bear responsibility for the consequences of its conduct.
Nightly News have seen correspondence in which former ministers and other persons who worked under the David Granger administration were given 36 hours to vacate government quarters. Those instructions came from the Clerk of the National Assembly, Sherlock Isaacs, Ms. Valerie Adams, Ms. Simona Brooms, Dr. Karen Cummins, Mr. Hemraj Rajkumar, and Mr. Sidney Alicock were all given eviction notices. Also, some staff of the MOTP were asked to immediately resign or be fired, including a number of political aides, drivers, and administrators of the Ministry of the Presidency. Such action is vulgar and vindictive, according to Mr. Granger. It is the view of the former president that since President Ali took office a mere 5 days ago, Guyana has already started to deteriorate.
The PNC recalls the violence unleashed by PPP hooligans against innocent school children traveling in a school bus at Bath Settlement in the Mahaica-Berbice region Friday the 6th of March in the wake of the elections. An atmosphere of fear and loathing has enveloped the nation. This should not be expected after elections in our country.
Travis Chase, HGP Nightly News.
Meanwhile, Travis Chase tells us word out of the coalition's camp is that they will be heading to court to challenge the results of the March 2nd elections.
Breaking his silence 5 days after chairperson of the Guyana Elections Commission, Justice Claudette Singh, declared the People's Progressive Party Civic the winner of the March 2, 2020 elections, former President David Granger, via a live broadcast on Friday, has made it clear that the APNU-AFC coalition will challenge the election results by way of an elections petition.
The PNC will challenge the declared results lawfully. We urge our members, supporters, and friends who have been patient throughout our campaign and the post-election process to continue to conduct themselves in a lawful and peaceful manner.
Highlighting that the struggle for justice continues, the former president noted that the report prepared by the chief elections officer using the recount figures does not represent the will of the Guyanese electorate.
The PNC repeats its assertion that fraudulent votes should not have been held to represent the will of the electorate. The inclusion of fraudulent votes in a declaration constitutes a violation of the fundamental principles of democracy. We maintain that the Elections Commission should have made a declaration based only on valid votes.
The former president has now officially put the PPP and the Guyana Elections Commission on notice.
The PNC cannot endorse a flawed report and will continue its campaign to ensure that the votes of all Guyanese are accurately recorded, tallied, and reported. The recount process revealed a plethora of grave anomalies, discrepancies, and irregularities.
Mr. Granger asserts that the recount was meant to determine both the quantitative and qualitative character of the votes cast at the general and regional elections, and to determine a final credible count at the end of the recount process.
It became manifest that the results did not meet the standard for credible elections. The PNC, in the national interest and with a view to preserving peace and maintaining order, has acted responsibly throughout this prolonged political crisis. We implore all Guyanese to remain calm and peaceful.
Travis Chase, HGP Nightly News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
Minister of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs Gail Teixeira has debunked the claims made by the leader of the PNCR, David Granger, who warned the PPPC to desist from its dangerous pattern of aggression against officials, members of society and party members. Wendell Badri has the details in the story.
The Minister of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs, Gail Teixeira, in a recorded interview on Friday, addressed a number of concerns that were raised in the public domain by the leader of the People's National Congress, PNC, David Granger, with regard to occupancy and possession of state assets. The minister highlighted the standard operating procedures in democracies.
There is what is standard, what they call standard operating protocol in parliamentary democracies. And that is when a government change and your political appointees, no matter what your name is, you step out. Gracefully, you collect your benefits, you collect what you're entitled to, and you wait for the next election.
Usually, government officials are granted certain privileges while serving the state, inclusive of housing and usage of state vehicles, among other perks. Responding to concerns raised by former President David Granger that former ministers whose normal residencies are located in the rural and hinterland regions were swiftly ordered to vacate their government quarters unreasonably within 36 hours, and public servants were being locked out of their offices without explanation.
No one has been terminated or fired. No one has received a letter terminating or firing them.
The Minister of Governance stated,
Ministers are no longer ministers of the APNU AFC government. We know that they have vacated their offices and that they are expected to hand over state property and state assets, cars, offices, residence, and other properties.
Meanwhile, the director of the state-operated Department of Public Information took to social media platform Facebook on Thursday evening, asking if there's anyone who could offer him and his wife a room for the night, while displaying a letter he received from the Assistant Secretary to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of the Presidency, asking him to vacate the state-owned premises he currently occupies with immediate effect. In calling for those persons who are in possession of state assets and other resources to behave honorably and do the right thing, Teixeira stated that in 2015, when there was also a transition of power, her party officials had acted in an honorable manner and had handed over to the state what belonged to it.
In 2015, we handed over, we did not resist. We gave up the vehicles, telephones we were ordered to give up, hand in the telephones, the laptops, etc.
Meanwhile, in a discussion on social media with gospel artist and radio personality Kester Dean, former Minister Simona Brooms spoke to how she had handed over state properties in her possession in a smooth and peaceful manner. She called on persons who might yet be in possession of state assets and resources to do the same.
There's a change of government, there will be movements, and all should expect it.
Yeah.
And so if you're living in a government flat and the government changes, you know already that you have to, if it's a government property, you have to
you gotta
leave.
move,
You gotta
yeah.
leave. You gotta leave.
The PPPC were declared winners of the 2020 elections on August 2nd after a 5-month election debacle, which saw several court proceedings being instituted during that period. On Friday, the PNC leader, David Granger, warned the PPPC government to desist from pursuing what he deems to be a dangerous pattern of aggression against officials, members of society, and persons it perceives to belong to other political parties. Wendell Badri for HGB Nightly News.
Over in St. Lucia, Ikar on Pentecostal Church objection to legal weed. More in this HTS News Force with Solange Alfred.
A war of words is being fought over cannabis by the Pentecostal Assemblies of the West Indies, PAWI, and the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari, ICA. PAWI officials held a press conference on Wednesday in attempts to deconstruct reasons given for the island to move along with preparing a regulatory framework that would govern a possible cannabis industry. In its efforts to do so, PAWI church officials claim that cannabis is not present in the Bible and that the religious justification mounted by the Rastafarian faith for use of the herb as part of their blessed sacrament is unfounded. Communication Officer for ICA, Emerson Nurse, has issued an immediate response.
It's one thing for outsiders to come and question, the religious practices of another organization. But I mean, okay, we know about the sacrament, which is the wine sacrament of the church. We know alcohol is legal, yes, but we also know alcohol is the number one dangerous drug in the world and the number one killer in the world, whether directly or indirectly. So we know these things. And also, we know ganja never hurt anybody. We met marijuana on this planet. I mean, the reason why Rastafari has always been advocating this plant, because Rastafari as a levity is closest to nature more than a lot of other followings, and by closeness to nature means closeness to the Most High or closeness to Jah.
Nurse sums up the PAWI press conference as nothing more than a public relations campaign by the church.
It's all well and good to seek little publicity stunts to improve your following or whatever, but it would be also nice if the church addresses real issues,
ICA's communication officer called for greater understanding and acceptance of other faiths. And on the topic of cannabis, Nurse had this to say.
For heaven's sake, cannabis is a cancer-fighting agent. It has cancer-fighting properties, pain-relieving properties. I don't see nothing wrong in that. So I do see why, if somebody cares about their members or their following, they would seek what is in the best interest of that following or that flock. And right now, that best interest is for the country to move toward freeing up the herb. It has health benefits, it has employment benefits, and to the Rastafari, we know it has spiritual benefits.
ICA continues to lobby for a move towards a decriminalized and legalized state for cannabis in St. Lucia, using the state of Colorado and country of Canada as reference points. A strong case has also been made for hemp derived from cannabis sativa that can be used for water and soil purification, paper, fiber, and biofuel. Solange Alfred, HTS News Force.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.